All right, Steve, jumping in today. I want to ask you this question. It's kind of a two-part question, and it's fairly general, so let me just read it to you. Actually, this was from the college age group, something Christy sent me, and it'd be a good topic. We can go on from there. It says this: when do you cross the line from reaching out to friends to be a light and being unequally yoked in your friendships? And then there was a second part to this question. I don't know if it was from a different person or not, but it goes like this. I have Christian friends who drink and sometimes get drunk while we hang out and watch movies or eat dinner. They know I don't drink and know I think it's wrong, so they don't offer it to me. But other than making sure they know the truth of Scripture, should I be responding in another way? Is it okay to be around them? How should I handle this friendship? Would it be considered unequally yoked? So I'll just let you go, and then we'll kind of go.
Okay, well, let's read the passage on being unequally yoked. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, and it says, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? What communion has light with darkness?" And then there's a bunch of rhetorical questions. What accord has Christ with Belial? It's a name for the devil, and the answer is none. What part has a believer with an unbeliever? And the implication is we're not to have it. And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? And again, none. For you are the temple of the living God, as God has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their God. They shall be my people. Therefore, come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. And so when you're looking at the whole situation with being unequally yoked, first off, you got to know what an unequal yoke is. A yoke was a device that they put across oxen to pull a plow, and it was something that pulled the plow specifically. It was also a steering device. I've had people tell me that it wasn't. I went and checked it out. I didn't know that much about yokes, but yeah, it was a steering device too. It's the idea of God wants to be able to steer you and take you in a certain direction. An unequal yoke is when you take two animals that are different types and you put them under the same yoke. And so it's the Bible talks about oxen and donkeys. It's actually in the Old Testament, in the book of Deuteronomy. Don't yoke an oxen with a donkey, God says, in the law. You're not allowed to do it. And what's really funny about that whole situation is that God's talking to a bunch of people who are farmers. Mm-hmm. It's not like you have to tell a farmer that. You know, the reason that you wouldn't do that is because you wouldn't be able to steer the plow straight. And so you would have basically the weak animal would be holding back the strong animal. The strong animal would push you off the path. You can't plow straight. And what's that in there for? And right. the reason that it's in there is not because God's looking down from heaven and looking at fields and going, I hate it when your fields aren't plowed straight. The reason that it's in there is because God's using a word picture. And the word picture has to do with being able to walk with the Lord in the way that he calls you to, be able to do the things that God calls you to. If you are tied together with somebody who is weaker than you, if you're tied together with somebody who is of a different sort than you, you are in an unequal yoke. And so the question was, when do you figure out that you're in an unequal yoke? When you can't plow straight. It's that simple. When your life starts going off the rails, when your life starts getting all wiggly, you know that you are in an unequal yoke. And I don't care if it's somebody who says that they're a Christian or somebody who is obviously an unbeliever. Unbelievers are easier to deal with because you know where they're at. But when you're dealing with somebody who says that they're a Christian, they're acting like an unbeliever, that's the case in that situation that was being spoken about. You're hanging out with somebody who gets drunk and is willing to overlook your tendency to want to drink and stuff. That's no different than any party that I ever went to. You had people who got wasted, and you had other people who were standing around and they could hold their liquor or whatever. And it's not the kind of thing that God's called us to. The Bible specifically says you're not to be drunk with wine. And so that's not even a debatable situation. That's sin when somebody's drunk with wine. Jesus, in a couple of different instances, talks about the fact that you don't want to be involved in a situation that's going to mess up your walk with him. One of the instances was in sexual immorality. It says if you look on a woman to lust after her, you've committed adultery in your heart. He says it would be better for you if you cut off your hand, if you plucked out your eye, than to go in a hellfire hole, basically. And then the other one was in stumbling people. He used exactly the same illustration. He talks about you don't want to be in a situation where people are getting stumbled, and if you stumble somebody, it would be better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck. And then he goes on and thrown in the midst of the sea. And then he goes on and he says, if your right hand offends you, cut it off. If your right eye offends you, pluck it out. And again, it's the idea that there's nothing more important than your walk with God. So if something's going to mess up your walk with God, then you need to cut it out of your life. He's not talking about cutting off arms and plucking out eyes with a fork or something. He's talking about making sure that your walk with God is your priority. And so if I am in a relationship with people who are influencing me to walk away from Christ in any way, then basically what they're doing is putting me in a position where I have to pick between them and Jesus. That's their deal. And if they're putting me in a position where I have to pick between them and Jesus, they're always going to lose. And so that's the kind of attitude that we need to have. There's a passage in the Old Testament in the Minor Prophets where the prophet is talking about clean and unclean. And he says, if you have a piece of meat and you touch it to something that is unclean, a piece of meat, he's talking to the priests, piece of meat that is holy, so it's something that was given in a sacrifice, and you touch it to something that's unclean, whether it's a piece of common meat or something else, he says, is the common thing going to become clean, or is the meat going to become unclean? And the answer Levitically is you take something that's clean and you touch it to something that is common, which is not Levitically pure or flat out unclean. What happens is the clean thing becomes unclean. It's a really clear thing in the Old Testament. And again, that's a word picture. That's a lifestyle picture, so that you know that what happens here is I don't go around cleansing people by being around them. That's not my job. My job is to speak to them about the Lord, and the Holy Spirit is the one who cleanses them. It's not me that does the cleansing. And so I have to watch out for becoming common or unclean, so to speak, in my relationships with the people who are around me. I want to be presentable to Jesus. I want him to be okay with what I'm doing. So,
okay, let me ask you. So, example of stumbling myself. Okay, only talking about myself right now.
Okay.
I get saved. I'm coming out of the world. We're used drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I have all my friends that are my party drinking buddies going to hang out in the bar. I get saved. Now I have to say, hey guys, I can't go hang out anymore because I don't want to be like that. And if I hang out with you, it's just too much of a what's the word? Temptation for me. And I don't want to go back into that lifestyle. I'm cutting it off. Mm-hmm. So that's my walk with the Lord.
Yeah.
Now moving to stumbling other people. What about the person who says, like for me, I've been a Christian now 14 years or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can go to a bar and you're not going to stumble me.
Right.
So now the issue doesn't become me, it becomes stumbling them or anyone else. And what is my walk doing as being a light? What is my walk doing in that situation? Mm-hmm. And so some people will say, well, I'm going to go hang out with them and I'm going to go to the bar and whatever, and I'm not going to drink because I'm a Christian and I don't want to, be like, oh, I'm too good for you type of thing. I want to share Jesus with them.
Right.
So where's the balance of, because this is what happens is they say that, but then their witness ends up being less than desirable. And the people in those situations are not looking at them going, oh, that's so cool that you come to hang out with me and tell me about Jesus. Usually it's like, he's folding his cards. I want him to be like us.
Yeah.
So how do you do all that?
Well, when I was in construction, I had a bunch of guys who always wanted me to go out with to the bars with them. I'm hanging out with them 8 hours a day or more. And when they would ask me to go to the bars, the answer was always no. And I just had a talk with them. And I said, if I went to a bar with you, would you listen to me about what I was saying about Jesus? And they go, oh yeah, really, we'd listen to, and I goof around like that. And I go, no, seriously, I go to a bar and I drink a beer with you. You can listen to anything I have to say. And they go, well, no, I'm not going to listen to that. And it's like the world has a standard for us. They know what's right, they know what's wrong, they know how a Christian's life is supposed to look, and they don't always have it totally down, but pretty much they know exactly what you're supposed to be like. And what they're looking for is, like you said, chinks in the armor. They're looking for situations that they can point to you and go, like you said, they've folded, and be able to have an excuse for going on with their lifestyle. And so, it's one of those things where we don't want to give them that excuse. The Bible has the Gospels. And one of the things that we need to realize as Christians is, the Gospels are about Jesus. And one of the things that we need to realize about as Christians is that most of the people on this planet, most of the people that you run into are never going to pick up the Bible and read about Jesus. They're never going to do it, not on their own, and not without a good reason. And that's why the Bible talks about the fact that we are God's epistles, that God has taken his word and written it on our hearts, and we're the Bible that people are reading. And so we need to be a good witness in those kinds of areas. And so stuff that's going to mess up a non-believer is stuff that I'm not going to do because I want to honor the Lord. Now, if it has something to do with what Jesus has to say, if they want me to lie, and so that their life is better, or so that I'm covering for them, or something like that, I don't give a rip what they want at that point if they're telling me to do something ungodly. But when it has to do with my liberties and it has to do with my witness, I want to be a good witness to the people who are around me. So
one of the things I like that you always say is that, listen, when it comes to unbelievers, they're not the enemy, they're the objective.
Right.
I'm trying to win them.
Yeah.
So for, maybe on a general thing, not necessarily going and hanging out at the bar, but just having relationships with non-Christians, trying to be that light and trying to win them. Where's the balance between being effective and then going to the line what we've been talking about of crossing the line where we're either unequally yoked in that relationship, mm-hmm. all the way up to who you're going to marry, as the Bible talks about, versus maintaining that witness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you don't marry a non-believer.
Right.
That's the closest relationship you're going to have in your life besides your relationship with God. And so,
but see if she goes to church, man. And she's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And I had exactly that kind of attitude. And what we're looking for in a wife, what we're looking for in a husband is somebody who's a godly person, not just somebody who goes to church. And I can line you up person after person who has gotten in a relationship because somebody said that they were, they believed in God, and that was their end to, that's your end to being able to go out with a person, ends up marrying them, and their marriage is just a total and complete wreck because they're unequally yoked. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that to yourself, and you certainly don't want to do that to the person that you're marrying. Mm-hmm. How would you feel if somebody, if your wife or husband, it's like they roll over, look at you one day, and you see in their eyes that two things have happened. They are not happy with you because you're not the person that they want you to be, and they know that they've settled for you. And it's like, you don't do that to people. It's not right. And so a lot of times what's happening in those kinds of relationships, it's like, they don't really have it together right now, but they kind of believe in God, and they'll go to church with me, and so I'll settle for that, and I'll change them as time goes on. Well, aren't you special? It's like, that's a rotten thing to do to somebody. It's like, that's not how you go into a marriage. And so you have to watch out for that kind of attitude, because that is actually, it's completely selfish. It's like, I just want what I want. I don't really like them the way that they are, but I figure if I badger them enough, I can change them around and make them what I want them to be. And that's not how you get married. You don't do that kind of stuff to people. As far as just relationships, I've had really good relationships with people who are non-believers over the years, but my best friends are not non-believers.
Right.
And so I still talk to guys. I'll still do things with guys that are non-believers. I go out to dinner with people. I've gone over to people's houses. I've had them over to my house, but they're not my closest friends. And again, what I surround myself with is people who are in love with Jesus and people who are going to spur me on and not hold me back. And that was one of those things that I struggled with when I was first a Christian. I compromised in those areas, and frankly, it caused me to walk away from God. And when I came back to the Lord, I was like, God had made it clear to me that it's Jesus or them. Which one do you want? And the one I want is Jesus. And so, I had some conversations with guys about that. And actually, after I backslid and came back to the Lord, I stopped hanging out with with some of my friends. I go over and see them every once in a while, and they give me a hard time because I wasn't hanging out anymore. What are you, holier than thou? They'd say things like that. And I go, when I used to hang out with you guys, what happened? And they go, well, you started acting like us. And I said, yeah, and I don't want to live there anymore. And so that's what's going on. And so I still care about you guys, but I'm not going to be here every day. And they got it. They understood exactly what was going on.
Right.
And actually, let me think. All those guys, every one of those guys that I had that conversation with got saved later on.
Okay, so that's what I was gonna ask you and make a comment, is that in those situations, again, I'm coming from a law enforcement, military, type A personality where I understand that it's not girls at the office, so maybe it's different for some people. Mm-hmm. But what the most success I've always had with these dudes is to not be part of their thing, but offset myself, where they're like, I'm not one of the guys, but yet there's like a respect thing there, and it's attractive that I'm not one of the guys.
Yeah.
And so whether it's hanging out or whatever the situation was, be bold and stuff like, dude, I'm not doing that with you. Yeah, well, why is that? Well, because I don't like you. And then you go into, no, it's because this. And they're just kind of like, but it's this attractive thing. And it goes back to being fishers of men, different bait for different fish. But I've always had the most success by being bold and separating myself, even though the world will say we got to be like them to win them. It's not true.
Yeah, it isn't true. It's like the problem that people have in the world is that they're looking for something and they don't know what it is. And so they're trying different things to fill the hole in their life. And so they go after one thing after another. And in the situation with a bunch of guys, what you've got generally is a situation where you got a bunch of guys who are doing the guy thing because they think that they're supposed to be doing the guy thing, which is the going out and getting drunk and cussing and telling dirty jokes and I call it trashing women, but just having an attitude towards the ladies and
their wives,
and their wives and all of that kind of stuff, and they think that they should do that, and if they don't do that, they feel like they're on the outs. And some of the guys who are most type A and most testosterone driven that I've met over the years are some of the wimpiest guys when you're talking about friends and that kind of stuff, because they want to be one of the crowd. And when a guy stands out and stands up and has principle and stands up for the right thing, he's going to get hassled. It always happens. He's going to get hassled, but he's going to get respected too if he's doing it in the right way.
Right.
Like you said. That's the same stuff that I did with guys. They'd ask me to go out to the bar. Why don't you want to hang out with us? You're ugly. My wife is cute. I don't want to be with you. And then I, like you said, I'd tell them the real reason, and they would agree with me. And again, there's that whole standoffishness where I can stand on my own and I don't give a rip what they think, and it's attractive because that's actually what a guy wants to be. Mm-hmm. Somebody who can do that. Somebody who can stand up on his own. And so, that's fishing, like you said, and that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. What you don't want to be is Marvin Milquetoast, who comes up to people going, "Oh, please, will you follow Jesus? I'll hang with you, and I'll be sweet to you, and I'll bless you if if you'll just listen to me." No, there's no guy going to listen to you. No, it's like it doesn't work that way. There's no respect there. There's no attractiveness. It's, I don't know. It's like throwing seaweed in front of a fish. It's like, so, you want to give them something that they're interested in, and they're not interested in a lousy copy of them, and so they already know that they have problems, and so you acting just like them is not going to help on any kind of level, and so we're to be strong and courageous. We're to be a light in a dark world. We're to be people who are winsome, in the sense of, again, just somebody who's attractive, and sometimes that can be counterintuitive. Sometimes the thing that's attractive is the guy who will stand up and tell everybody, "Hey, that's stupid," and I'm not doing it, and move off the rail, basically.
So the only other thing I can think of that goes to this is, and usually, interestingly enough, this comes from the Christian crowd, not the non-Christian crowd, most of the time that I get it. But people will say, when the comment that you made of being holier than thou, they'll think that we have the attitude of being judgmental, or that I'm better with them than them, so I'm not going to hang out with them. When the reality is that a lot of the times when I get in conversations with people, it is never in the intent of that I'm better than you, that I know more than you, that I'm judging you or your lifestyle. Usually they end going, no one's really been able to have a conversation so relaxed with me. And I just talk to them about the stuff and try and it doesn't always happen, but try the best I can to know, listen, I'm not judging you. I love you.
Right.
And really the only reason I'm talking to you is that I love you. If I wasn't a Christian, I wouldn't even be bothering. I don't even want to talk to you if I'm a Christian. Yeah. So the fact that I'm spending time with you is not that I'm judging you, but that I care about you.
Yeah. If somebody came up to me and said, "You're being holier than thou," I'd go, "Well, what do you," I'd ask them, "What are you talking about?" "Well, you always talking about Jesus and stuff." And then I probably just explain to them what holy is. And holiness is being set apart for a special purpose. And I just go, you know what? My life is something that's set apart for a special purpose. I'm set apart for Jesus's use. And so if you're talking about that, then yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I am. I'm going to live my life for Christ, and I don't care what you think. I do care about you, but I don't care about what you think about that. And if it's making you feel uncomfortable, sometimes that's a good thing. And I've had those kinds of conversations with people. But one of the things that you don't want to be is somebody who's like, this whole thing with being unequally yoked is not looking at people and going, "Ew."
Right.
It's that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're maintaining our walk with God so that we can have the life that Jesus has for us. Like it says, "Come out from among them, and I'll be your father. You'll be my sons." I want to have that life that Jesus has for me, but the other thing that actually goes with that is when I have that kind of life, it's attractive to the people who are around me. And so, like you said earlier, one of my points that I make with people is that I'm not looking at unbelievers and going, "Ew, they're the enemy," because they're not. They're just a bunch of people who are messed up and lost. They're the objective. They're the ones that we want. And there's a way to reach people, and being a lousy copy of their flaky life is not the way to reach them. And so, that's what it comes down to. So, you're unequally yoked if your walk with God is suffering because of the relationships that you have. You're unequally yoked. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Good on that.
I think so. Yeah.